Okay, so today's opener, although it says November 20th, it's actually November 28th. The type of equations that are on this opener will be the type of quiz that you'll be taking on Friday. So you're going to look at the first equation. It's 3 times the square root of 5a plus 1 equals 13. The first thing that you should do is circle your variable, draw your line of equality, and then you're going to box your square root. The purpose for boxing your square root is to remind you that you have to get rid of any number that is not inside of that box before you can get rid of the square root. So when you go to determine what number you should get rid of first, whether it's the 3 or the 1, you're going to use order of operations backwards. So according to order of operations backwards, which would be, instead of PEMDAS, would be SADMAP, you look for the S. Are there any subtraction? No. Then you go to the A. Any addition? Yes, the plus 1. So you get rid of the plus 1 first. The inverse operation for plus 1 would be minus 1. Your 1's cancel on the left side, so then you're able to bring down 3 times the square root of 5a plus 1 equals, and then you're going to simplify the right side. 13 minus 1 will be 12. Your square root is still not by itself. You still have to get rid of the 3. So the inverse operation of 3 times the square root would be 3 divided by. So you're going to divide each side by 3. Your 3's cancel. You're able to then bring down the square root of 5a plus 1 equals, then 12 divided by 3 is 4. Now, if you look at your left side of your line of equality, you now see that the square root is by itself. So according to your notes, step 2, the next step to do is to get rid of the square root sign. The inverse operation for square root is going to be square. So if you square one side of your line of equality, you must square your other side. So square and square root cancel. So on the left side, you can now bring down 5a plus 1. And on the right side, you need to simplify 4 squared, which will equal 16. From here, you have a two-step equation that you're going to solve. Again, you have to refer to order of operations backwards to determine what number you get rid of first, which is going to be that plus 1. The inverse operation is going to be minus 1. Bring down your 5a equals 16 minus 1 is 15. And now you're down to a one-step equation. In order to get the variable a by itself, you do the opposite of multiplication, which is division. Divide each side by 5. Your 5's cancel on your left. Bring down your variable a. 15 divided by 5 equals 3. If you missed any part of that, I would go ahead and pause the video and have the students correct it. Okay, let's take a look at the next equation. Now you're solving an equation with a square. You're going to follow the exact same steps. So if I were you, I'd recommend getting your notes out from yesterday, solving equations with squares, and you're going to start by circling your variable, drawing your line of equality. The next step is going to be circle what's being squared. In this particular equation, the only thing that's being squared is just the b. The reason why it wouldn't be 2b squared, the reason why the 2 isn't being squared with that b is because it's not in parentheses. So just the b is being squared here. Now, the whole reason why we box the square is because we want to get the square by itself. So you have to get rid of the 2 and the minus 1. You're going to use order of operations backwards, which is SADMAP, to get the square by itself. So the first number that you're going to get rid of is the minus 1. Again, the square is still not by itself because you need to get rid of the 2. So in order to get rid of the 2, you do the inverse operation of multiplication, which is division. And you divide each side by 2. So 50 divided by 2 is 25. Now your square is by itself. So you have to follow step 2. Step 2 says to get rid of the square. In order to do that, you do the inverse operation of square, which is square root. So square and square cancel. So on my left side, I bring down just my variable b. And on my right side, the square root of 25 is a perfect square, which will be 5. And box your answer. Okay, go ahead and turn your opener over to the back side. And you have 2 more. So again, we're going to solve an equation with the square root. Start by drawing your line of equality, circling your variable, and box only the square root. Now, we have to get the square root by itself, so we have to get rid of 2 numbers on the outside. We do that by using order of operations backwards. So I'm going to first get rid of the minus 2. So I use the inverse operation, excuse me, of subtracting 2, which will be adding 2. My 2's cancel. 1 plus 2 is going to be 3. And then I bring down the rest of my equation. 3 times the square root of 3c plus 4. Now, my square root still is not by itself, so I need to get rid of the 3. Anytime a 3 is touching a square root sign or a parentheses, or any number for that fact, means to multiply. So in order to get rid of it, you have to do the inverse operation, which is division. So I'm going to divide each side by 3, cancel. My left side, 3 divided by 3 is going to be 1. And then on my right side, I can bring down the square root of 3c plus 4. Now my square root is by itself, so I'm ready to get rid of the square root sign. I do that by doing the inverse operation of square root, which is square. If I square one side of the line of equality, I must square the other. The square root and square cancel. And then on my left side, I'm going to simplify 1 squared, which will equal 1. And on the right side, I bring down my 3c plus 4. Now I have a 2-step equation I'm going to solve. The first number I'm going to get rid of is the 4. The opposite of a plus 4 is a minus 4. I'm going to simplify my left side. 1 minus 4 will equal negative 3. To get the variable by itself, I'm then going to divide each side by 3. My 3's will cancel. Negative 3 divided by 3 will equal negative 1. Again, if you made any mistakes, make sure you correct them. That way you get a 100 on your daily opener instead of a 1 out of 2, which would be a 50%. All right, last one. First thing I'm going to do is circle my variable. Draw my line of equality, and I'm going to box what's being squared. In this particular equation, because the 2d minus 4 is in parentheses with the square right behind it, that whole set of parentheses is being squared. So I'm going to have to get rid of the 2 that is on the outside of the box and the minus 1. According to order of operations backwards, Sadbep, I'll get rid of that minus 1 first by adding 1 to both sides. The 1's cancel on the left. I bring down the 2 times 2d minus 4 squared equals, and then 199 plus 1 is 200. I still don't have the square by itself. I need to get rid of the 2 on the outside of the parentheses, so I do that by dividing by 2. I bring down the 2d minus 4 squared on the left, and on the right I take 200 divided by 2, which is 100. Now the square is by itself, so I do the inverse operation of square, which is square root. Whatever I do on one side, I have to do on the other. Square and square root cancel on the left, so now I can just bring down the 2d minus 4. I no longer have to have that in parentheses, so I can just drop them. And then the square root of 100 will be 10. Now you're down to a 2-step equation. So you're going to add the 4. 4's cancel. Left side, bring down your 2d. 10 plus 4 is 14. Then how do you get the variable d by itself? Divide by 2 on each side. Then d equals 14 divided by 2 is 7.